Look down at your own arms right now. If there's nothing there, you're standing in a room where you're outnumbered, and you already know it, even if you've never said it out loud. That's not a small detail. And psychology actually has a specific explanation for why holding out feels different for you than it did for the generation before you. Here's the number that flips the whole story on its head. Millennials aren't the generation that quietly sat out the tattoo trend. Pew Research puts it at 47%. Millennials are the single most tattooed generation in American history, ahead of Gen Z, way ahead of Gen X. So if you're a millennial man with bare skin, you're not part of some large, comfortable majority quietly opting out together. You're the actual outlier, inside your own generation, standing against the current instead of alongside it. You're at a barbecue, and you notice it before anyone says anything. Sleeve. Forearm piece. Ankle thing on the guy who swore he'd never. You do the math without meaning to. 4 out of 6 people in this circle have ink, and you're one of the 2 who don't. That's not a vibe. That's roughly the actual national number, standing right in front of you at a cookout. That's not insecurity talking. That's just accurate pattern recognition. You clocked a real statistical shift before anyone published the number for you. You've been close before. 24, a specific design, a specific night, a friend already in the chair next to you. You had the cash. You had the appointment. And something made you stand up and walk out before the needle ever touched down. That's not fear. Researchers who study decision-making under permanence call it something closer to maximizing. It's a well-documented tendency to keep searching for the objectively best option instead of settling for a good one, especially when the choice can't be undone. Psychologist Barry Schwartz built an entire body of research around this exact instinct. It comes with a measurable cost. Maximizers report more regret after decisions than people who just pick something reasonable and move on. You weren't scared of the pain. You were scared of picking wrong on a canvas you can't return. Hold on to that for a second, because there's a second layer running underneath it that has nothing to do with indecision at all. There's a concept in psychology called costly signaling. The idea that a signal only means something if it actually costs you to send it. A company that quietly guarantees its product needs no billboard about quality. The guarantee itself is the proof. A tattoo works the same way. It's expensive, it's permanent, and it tells a room something about you without a word being said. You looked at that transaction and, consciously or not, decided you didn't need to pay it. Not because you had nothing to say, because the people who already knew you didn't need convincing, and you never fully trusted the ones who did need convincing to be worth the ink. Here's where it actually gets specific to your generation, and it's not the same story Gen X tells about themselves. You came up watching the job market punish visible difference in ways your parents never had to think about. Employer surveys have found a real, measurable hiring bias against visible tattoos. Hiring managers rating candidates as less promotable, less trustworthy, less hireable, purely on ink alone. You graduated or started your career somewhere inside the 2008 wreckage when every advantage mattered and every risk got weighed twice. A permanent visible mark wasn't rebellion in that economy. It was one more variable you didn't control. In interviews, you were already losing to 100 other applicants. So the calculation wasn't really about the tattoo. It was about a decade where you'd already watched enough people lose ground over things that shouldn't have mattered. You weren't going to hand anyone one more excuse, even an unfair one. Which means the guy standing at that barbecue with bare arms isn't performing rebellion, and he isn't performing purity either. He's not the Gen X guy quietly proving he never needed the crowd's permission, because in his generation, the crowd went the other direction entirely. He's something stranger. Someone who looked at the actual majority around him and still said no, on purpose, more than once. Part caution. Part something closer to self-trust. So which one are you? There's the guy who never got close, because the whole idea genuinely never called to him. And there's the guy who got as far as the chair, more than once. And something in him kept saying not yet, not this one, not permanently. Until not yet quietly became the whole answer. Neither version needs defending, but only one of them is actually indifference. The other is years of careful no's stacking up into something that looks like a choice from the outside, and felt, most of those nights, like just not being ready to bet on any single version of yourself forever. If that barbecue scene hit close, tell me in the comments. Were you ever actually in the chair, or did the idea never call to you at all? And if you know a guy who spent a decade thinking about getting one, send him this. He might finally understand what he's actually been weighing.